This conference will now be recorded. This conference will now be recorded.
There we go. All right, Chair Hunt, you ready?
Doug's froze.
I think you're right. Good morning, everyone. Let's wait here a minute while we see if we can't get Chair Hunt back on board here. Oh, isn't this indicative of our last year plus the COVID world we live in? Oh boy. Well, I'll start off by saying happy St. Patty's Day. I do have green someplace in my, I'm not wearing it specifically, but on my jacket, I have a little bit of green. I hope the rest of you are.
Well, if you turn, your mic is on, so you got a little bit of green right there, Wayne.
Thank you, Roy. That works for me. All right, Doug, are you back on? Well, let's give it another minute here. Uh-oh, now my phone's ringing. And it is the chair. Hold on a minute, folks. All right, Chair Hunt has temporarily lost internet. He's getting reconnected either hopefully on his computer, or he's going to call in on a phone in just a couple of minutes. So what he suggested we do is to go ahead and talk about the other matter we wanted to discuss that's not related to budget. So why don't we deal with that first? And I'm going to put some stuff up on the screen if I can do this right. All right. And as always, it's going to take a little bit of time to get this going. What we're doing is I sent to each of you a copy of a link to the Lincoln County Essential Worker Assessment for COVID-19 vaccination sequencing, and then a document that the Oregon Health Authority, OHA, put out that identifies who those essential workers are. We had previously discussed this in the M team and had the initial approach was to have a single point of contact at each employer. And we were going to run this through county personnel so that we could make sure that we, one, identified all the essential workers, two, that they got on the appropriate wait list, and three, that there was a point of contact that we could actually schedule folks to come in. That has changed up somewhat. The public health folks, and it's Amy Snyder, who is our contact that's doing this particular process, has found it's actually more efficient to for an employer like Lincoln County to go down to the department and office level to do the assessment and then communicate directly with a point of contact in each department or office. So what we'd like to have you do is to review that the assessment document. And again, it's not, unfortunately, not showing on the screen right now. But the document has the information that you can provide to Amy Snyder and identifies with a lot more clarity what the types of workers are who are essential workers. And even within that category of essential workers, there are subcategories of who will actually be called in first and who will be called in later. So it's extremely important that we maintain that contact for our employees with Amy Snyder and provide that particular information. And so I want to just ensure that everybody looks at that, fills that out, and gets that to Amy. So I know that Commissioner Jacobson has been working on this, so I'm going to turn it over to her for any additional comments.
Yeah, just a couple of things to add. One is for other people that might be watching this, the public, that is also available for other employers. So it's not just internal to the county. We're getting that as far and wide as we can. So we want other employers to fill that out as well. And then just a comment that, you know, we view all of our employees at Lincoln County as essential and valuable, absolutely, but that doesn't mean that in following CDC and OHA guidelines that they deem everybody as essential workers and frontline workers. So there will be many county employees that do not qualify as essential workers, even though, you know, we think everybody's essential. So I just want to make that clear that not everybody's going to qualify under those CDC or OHA guidelines. Additionally, there might be certain people in departments that might qualify under those guidelines and certain people that do not. The whole point is those frontline workers that are exposed to the public, but if your job has been being done online or being done away from the public, then you're not going to be considered in that frontline piece. So it may not be that an entire department qualifies. There might be certain people within the department that do. So I think it's important to kind of read through the assessment and see what people and what parts of your department might fit. And just as Wayne said, it's really important we have everybody fill that out so that public health can kind of start understanding, not just for county workers, but for the entire county, how many people presumably they might have in each of those categories, and what potential barriers they might have in getting vaccines to those groups. So thanks for doing that in advance. We're also working on some communication that's going to go out internally to staff. We know there's been some confusion around the survey that personnel did back, I think in like December of 2020, kind of assessing interest in like a county vaccine clinic, similar to what we do for like flu shots for employees. That was before we know what we know now around CDC and OHA sequencing. And so, you know, there is not going to be a county COVID, you know, employee vaccination clinic until it's open to the general public, you know, way later. So we will be sending out some communication to employees to let them know that. But in the meantime, if you have employees that qualify underage, that are 65 plus or other categories, please have them sign up on the wait list and do that. Don't have them wait until later, until we may have some type of county clinic way in the future. But if they qualify now, have them go ahead and sign up as individuals if they meet those age criteria.
Thank you.
This is Todd.
I'm back.
I have a quick question.
Can everybody hear me?
Yeah, Todd had a question, Chair Hunt.
Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Todd.
So I've got an employee that doesn't live in the county, but would probably be a frontline worker. Do I need to send him to search in his own county, or can he sign up for our vaccinations?
I think the answer to that is you can probably do both.
Yeah, he doesn't have to go to another county. We can take care of him. It's vaccine belongs to the public, so there's no boundaries on where you can get it.
Right.
Okay, great.
All right, I apologize for my internet, excuse me, internet connectivity problems. Wayne, are we covered on COVID? Anything more, you or Katie?
Nothing else from me.
Okay. Again, I'll remind everyone that I assume we are now being recorded and we are live on YouTube. For those in the audience, this is an opportunity to watch the M-Team Budget Committee. It is not necessarily a time for public comment. That opportunity will be presented later. Specifically, there will be budget committee meetings that will be held virtually on May 4th, May 18th, and May 28th. So those are the times when public input can be received on the budget, but This is all three commissioners are present at this meeting, so we are in compliance with public meeting law. I also think that for people that may be watching, it might be helpful to identify people rather than have different people identify themselves. I think I'll just try to go through department by department, and if I miss somebody, speak up. But I will let my fellow commissioners introduce themselves, or Katie, I think you've already spoken. Commissioner Hall.
I'm sorry, I was momentarily distracted. What was the question?
All right, I'll just introduce you. We have we have all three commissioners, myself as chair, Commissioner Jacobson, and Commissioner Hall. We have County Counsel Wayne Belmont. We have Joe Davidson from the assessor's office. I'm going to try to do this alphabetically by office. We have Dana Jenkins from the clerk's office. We have Ellen Branford representing the DA's office. District Attorney Lainey Danforth will be joining us shortly. From the finance department, we have our director, Christina Shearer, and our deputy finance director, Deanna Gravel. Health and Human Services, we have our co-directors, Rebecca Austin and Rebecca McBee Wilson. From our IT department, we have Todd Richmond. From Parole and Probation, we have Tony Kempa. Tony. Personnel, we have Mike Herford. From Planning, we have Anno Husing. From Public Works, we have Roy Kenyon. From the Sheriff's Office, we have Sheriff Landers and Lieutenant Shanks. From the Surveyor's Office, our newest member of the M team, Eli Adam, was appointed I guess earlier this month to that position as surveyor. We have Cinda Bruce from the Transit Department, and we have Jane Welsh from the Treasurer's Office. Did I miss anybody? Oh, and Casey Miller, who is the Public Information Officer for Lincoln County. All right, I think I got everybody covered. Let's see, I guess the next thing would be Council Belmont. Are you going to talk about the preliminary budget discussions and the purpose of these meetings?
I will. Thank you, Commissioners. Wayne Belmont, County Council. And just for those who are observing this for the first time or participating, we have a number of new M-Team members, actually, as you noted, who haven't gone through this process, either haven't gone through it or have only been through it one time during the COVID era. So this is a great opportunity to discuss what we do here. So I want to stress, first of all, that this is a very preliminary examination of the budget. This is not the budget that will be presented to the Budget Committee. It's the efforts of our finance department and all the various departments and offices to identify the resources that we have available and the expenses that we expect to incur during the coming fiscal year. There's three really pillars for what we do in this particular process. It's quite unique amongst counties, general law counties in Oregon, by having a management team that actually gets together on a regular basis to work on the budget. And those three pillars are, this is a collaborative process. We all work together. We know that we have limited resources that have to be distributed to a variety of services that we provide. We're a multi-purpose organization. We do a lot of different things. We have to coordinate. We need to coordinate all the activities that we do and all the expenditures we make so that we can meet those services that are legally required and what are locally desired. And finally, this is our opportunity for communication. It's the transparency and communication, not only between ourselves, but with the public. I think that's probably the area that has suffered the most in the last year. I know from my own personal perspective, it's been an incredible challenge to try and put together what we need to do to meet those first two pillars, the collaboration and coordination, doing it in the environment of responding to the COVID crisis and the wildfire crisis. So I appreciate everybody coming together here to really further that last pillar, the communication pillar. as I said, this is the beginning of the process, so a lot of the numbers are going to be, it's going to appear as though we have a lot of work to do, which we do, and I don't want to minimize that, but it's not unusual where we are at this point in the process to see some disparities between the numbers we've got and the numbers we'll finally end up with, because it's a very front end of the process. The focus in this process is on the general fund. All of the departments here have touched the general fund in some way. Lincoln County is an organization that has an annual budget of about $110 million. Over 44 or 45 million of that relates to the general fund. The general fund is the all-purpose fund that really catches a lot of the services that we provide. And it's usually the fund that has the most moving parts to it, let's put it that way, that we have to pull together to put together the budget. So that focus is really at this point on the general fund and how it touches some of the other funds in the county. It's not that we don't do review the other funds. And in fact, each of the departments and offices has prepared these other funds for presentation to the budget committee and board through finance. And we're having those conversations. They just don't necessarily have to take place in the M team at this level, although the information will be available to everybody in terms of what our overall budget looks like. As Chair Hunt said, this is the front end of the process. This is our internal process to get to a budget. By law, we're required to present a balanced budget. When we get to June 28th, when the Board of Commissioners will hold their final public hearing and adopt a budget, it will be balanced. So unlike some other government levels, we have to make sure that our revenues and resources equal our expenditures. And so that's the beginning of this process to get to that. I do want to note that there will be, as Chair Hunt said, numerous opportunities for public comment at the Budget Committee meetings. The Budget Committee is made up of the 3 commissioners and 3 lay members appointed by the board. They are the ones that hold the original meetings. They do the necessary changes that they feel have to occur in the budget, and they then approve a budget document. Once that is approved, there is an opportunity for some additional adjustments to be made by the board, which they do after the public hearing and adopt before July 1. And that process results in an adopted budget. So that nomenclature is approval by the Budget Committee, adoption by the Board of Commissioners. So I think that really covers the preliminary information I wanted to cover, and that also covered the Budget Committee process and calendar. I will note that the Budget Committee meetings will, at this point, be virtual too, and we will make sure we get a lot of information out about the process for people to comment on the budget. And again, that's reflective of the COVID changes that have been made for how we're taking public input. But there will be many opportunities for public input. So with that, I think we've gotten through the next 2 items on the agenda, and we're ready for questions from the M team, Chair Hunt.
Okay, thank you, Wayne. And I'll just add a little bit on the budget calendar. The proposed budget that, again, by law has to be balanced, I believe will be available around April 2nd. And so I would tell people that may be watching or listening that that document will be available, I believe, on our website for review, and certainly that can be a source of questions or comments from the public, again, on those virtual meetings that we've already discussed. So with that, I believe, yeah, there's the budget calendar. Thank you, Casey. The bold dates are kind of the key dates. And I guess I would add that right now the Budget Committee has a vacancy. Linda Roy, who lives in Lincoln City and has served for, I believe, about 8 years, has indicated her desire to resign. And so the county is in the process of accepting applications to fill her position. And she would serve along with the 3 commissioners and John Baird from Lincoln City and Carrie Boyd. I'm not sure where Carrie lives, but she certainly is a resident of Lincoln County.
I believe she's on the north end of the county.
North End, okay, so another representative from the North End. All right, thank you, Katie. All right, questions from the M team before we get into the budget document? And I guess I'll ask either raise your hand or I'll look for microphones that turn green and try to avoid talking over each other. We've only got, 24 people. No questions at this point? All right. I think at this point, turn the presentation over to our finance director, Christina, and we can start going through the numbers. I will say that, as Wayne indicated earlier, at this point in the budget process, we historically have, I'll say, a significant gap between the proposed revenues and the proposed expenses. I think right now we've got a negative gap of about $5 million. But again, historically, this is kind of where we tend to start. And the process, part of the process that we go through today and at our next meeting on Monday is to see how we can reduce that gap, look for opportunities to reduce expenses, and frankly, there are some opportunities to increase revenues. I know that I've asked Director Shearer to reach out to each of the department heads, and I know that that effort has been there. I know there's efforts on both sides to talk about the budget, and so we need to continue to do that. And with that, Christina, I'll turn it over to you unless Wayne raised his hand. So Wayne.
Yeah, I just want to do a couple of introductory remarks. Sorry about that.
Okay.
The first thing is I want to make sure everybody understands. I know there's been a lot of information out in the news, and we've been looking at a lot of information surrounding the American Rescue Plan Act. This is the latest stimulus package, the $1.9 trillion act that was passed by Congress, signed by the president, and is in effect now. And this will have some impact on our budgets. What I want to make sure it's clearly understood is we have there is no funding either identified or proposed at this point in the current budget. And until we get further information coming out of, really it'll come in this case out of the U.S. Department of Treasury, which will provide the guidance for how those funds can actually be used. And for what purposes, we don't know. We do know that there will be money to really address COVID, money to address COVID. And so it will have an impact on our budget bottom line at some point. But we're not prepared at this point to actually project what that is and where that will be located within our budget. So that will occur during the course of the next, before July 1, I'm sure we're going to have a much better idea, and we'll make the necessary adjustments to the budget to reflect the American Rescue Plan Act. But if you have any questions about that, I would say the best thing to do is say, stay tuned. We'll get you more information.
We can always receive the money, but in order to spend it, we have to appropriate it. So, all right.
So Doug, can I ask a question about that's kind of related to that? The COVID money that we got last year, is that reflected in the current budget and in the projections? Any of that?
Christina.
Yes, it is. The funds that were receipted into the general fund are included in this, the numbers that we've put in there. Much of it is residing in the fund balance. There is some funds that we received on a reimbursement. All of them were received on a reimbursement basis, but some have been reallocated and already spent. So it's complicated, but yes, everything that we received in the first round is included in this budget.
Other questions? All right. Christina.
All right, I'm putting up on my screen, I've got it as pretty much as big as I can make it, a summary of the general fund budget. As you all know, the general fund is pretty complicated. It's got a lot of departments, a lot of different programs, but basically what I'm showing you here is the fund in total without a department split of any kind. So the numbers that you provided to us in terms of projections for fiscal 21, which is our current fiscal year, and fiscal 22, which is next fiscal year, are all summarized here. So starting at the top, we have the beginning fund balance, projected revenues and transfers in, our projections for personal services, materials and services, capital, debt, transfers out. That's it's subtotals to our total use. We don't actually project contingency and appropriation. Those are budget numbers. They're not numbers that we actually spend out of or anything else. So the balance, the difference between resources of 47 million and uses of almost 39 million is a projected ending fund balance of $8 million, plus or minus. There is a disconnect up here. I reckon one of the things that we're going to keep repeating this. This is a work in progress, and fund balance is still currently in progress. I have budget or audit adjustments that I need to post. I hope to have those done by Monday so that we will have new numbers. But this number, this beginning fund balance, is always derivative of the projected ending fund balance. So as we change ending fund balance, we have to go back through and readjust beginning fund balance. And that right now, that is sitting out of sync a little bit. But ordinarily, what you will see is that the ending fund balance becomes the beginning fund balance of the next year. Right now, as we sit, we are looking at a difference between our resources for fiscal 22 of $42 million, including fund balance, and our projected uses of $41 million, plus the reserves that we budget. We always budget contingency, future debt service, compensated absences, at a board goal of 2 months of operating expenses. So what we're looking for is this $6.4 million. That's the target for our ending fund balance. That's board policy. The board and the budget committee can always choose to do differently. They can make it smaller, they can make it larger, but that is the target that is stated in our fiscal policy. So assuming that we need to keep $6.4 million in reserve, that's what's, that's the math that drives out this $5.4 million. The bulk of the difference is personnel services. You can see the growth here. It's almost $1 million. And also the decline in our available revenues. Largely, that revenue decline is being driven at the intergovernmental level. Here again, there's nothing simple. Some of this decline is due to the fact that we're making some financial changes in the way we structure our finances, and we're moving parole and probation, those programs. There's 3 departments, 125, 126, and 129. They're moving to a new fund. They're taking their revenues with them. And so that is creating what looks like a significant drop in intergovernmental. It is a drop, but about $2 million of that is the shift of parole and probation to a new fund. So it gets a little complicated in there. I do have more detail on intergovernmental, but that is largely what's going on. Some of it is also timing. We have grants that come and go and begin and end on something other than a fiscal year basis. Some of them repeat year after year. Some of them are one time. Some of this is COVID money. All of our COVID money shows up in intergovernmental because it's federal grants. And so this difference here is driving our difference, but there's a lot of reasons for it. So moving down again, personnel services. Last year we budgeted a vacancy savings. Right now, we have not budgeted a vacancy savings. We likely will, but that's not included yet. And so that's part of this difference as well, why that number is going up. This number right here includes all of our personnel services, vacancies fully filled at their full budget level, increases for health insurance rates, PERS rates if applicable, increases in our unemployment and workers' comp, and that's what's driving that number, but no offset for vacancies yet. Currently, our vacancies run, or historically, our vacancies run between about 5%, or 5% vacancy savings to as high as 9%. 9 is not common. Certainly wouldn't want to go necessarily there. But there's certainly some level of flexibility in terms of budgeting vacancy savings, and so we will likely do that. We just need to discuss what level we want to do that at. This transfer out number is also driven high by the need to move a fund balance for the parole and probation programs to the new fund. This number is subject to change. Right now, we are evaluating what those fund balances are. We're doing some research, and we'll have to go back and double check those numbers. But this is the number that we have preliminarily that we'll be transferring to that parole and probation fund. Also, the subsidy that those funds get from the general fund in excess of their own intergovernmental revenue is now a transfer out. It used to just be an expenditure that was absorbed by the general fund. Because they're in a new fund, that will now be a transfer out. So it's kind of shifting those expenses around a little bit. So there's some things that are kind of making things look a little wonky, but there are reasons for that, and I can certainly answer any questions about those if we have them. Does anybody have any questions before we dive in any deeper?
Yeah, maybe go a little bit more in detail, since that seems to be what's causing the deficit, is that parole and probation transfer. Wouldn't, in my mind, think that the expenditures then would come out of a different fund instead of out of the general fund? So wouldn't both of them offset each other?
Yes, as a matter of fact, they do. But the initial transfer out of the balance, that we can't erase that effect. So the revenues are not being budgeted. So you can see the projection for revenue is here in fiscal 21. Oh, you can see this, right? Yeah, okay. But not in 22. The expenditures are the same way, and I'll give you an example. I'll move over here. Oh, good, it's already queued up. So you can see that as it stands right now, in fiscal 21, in this department, they've got a beginning fund balance, their revenues, and their expenses, and then they have a balance that carries forward. But for fiscal 22, we're not budgeting any expenditures or any revenues, but we have to budget the transfer out of the beginning fund balance so that that balance carries over to the other fund where all the revenues and expenses will be carried going forward. This is one time, it won't happen again, because they will then carry their own fund balance forward from here on out. Does that make sense?
Maybe. I'm just trying to determine how that is causing us such a significant problem this year.
It's not necessarily in itself causing a problem. It's just causing the numbers to look different. So you're right that the net effect is really, it's not causing our deficit per se. What's really causing our deficit is that we're spending more than we're getting in revenues. At a general fund level, in the general fund total, if we look at our revenues year over year, so even let's just look at 21. Our revenue total is 37.42, but we're projected to spend almost 39. Even if we take transfers out, we're spending more money than we're bringing in. That's what's driving this conversation more than anything else.
Katie, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, so question for Tina. Can you scroll to the personnel piece you just set up? There it is. Thank you. So in that projected piece, did you still leave in the 6-month vacancy, or is that fully staffed all the way through?
In the projected, this is basically our estimate of what we're actually going to spend this year. So we budgeted 27.6, and that included a vacancy savings of 7.5%. We're projecting right now, the departments are projecting to spend 27.3. So we're a little bit less than what we budgeted, which is good. But it is not, so it is assuming that we're holding vacancies open, and we have held vacancies open, and that's how we've been able to meet that budget. But this number does not include a 7.5% vacancy savings. It's fully funded, 100% all positions.
So in that budgeted number for the future, there is, that is perhaps off as we continue to do vacancy savings, and then that number would be high.
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
One more question while you're on that page there. And again, back to that, so I can try to wrap my mind around it with that parole and probation transfer to a new fund. Why isn't that personnel services reduced by 2 million or whatever it is to show that those expenditures are going to come out of that new fund?
It actually is, but there's other things going on in personnel services. We've actually added a new department, budgeting it for the first time next year, and that is the county administration department for the county administrator. So that is partially offsetting those savings or the removal of those positions. So between the increases in cost, the fully funding all positions with no vacancy savings, and the addition of the new department, that's why we're still seeing an increase even though we're moving parole and probation out.
You're saying if we wouldn't move them out, obviously our revenues would show higher, but this would show whatever corresponding higher to.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Precisely. You'll also notice that capital is sharply reduced. In our request, we do have a decision package in there, or a couple that are capital that would increase this if they were funded, but that is also showing in here as well. So speaking of decision packages, I don't have that open.
Well,
I'm going
Christina,
to.
if I may, well, first of all, Katie has a question, and I have a suggestion.
Okay.
Thanks, Chair Hunter. I just wanted to kind of restate something. I think, Christina, you had said that we have a new department coming with county administration, and I wouldn't say that's a new department. I would say with Council Belmont's retirement coming up here, that we're simply, relooking at that position and will not be replacing Wayne's position as it is now, but rather replacing it with a different kind of position and some support there. So I just didn't want the public to think we're starting an entirely new department. I think we're just taking Wayne's position and more recognizing at it and kind of county administration and kind of calling that what it is as we move forward with another position. And there is no replacing Wayne at all. And I think we all recognize that. So we had to think about how to do that differently. So I just wanted to provide some clarity.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just going to comment that the hiring of a county administrator really is, I guess I'll say it's a new department in that we have a county administrator as a department, but as far as staffing, it's not necessarily increasing staffing because Council Belmont will not be replaced within the legal counsel department. We will be hiring an administrative assistant to support the county administrators. So that would be a new hire, but it's to support the county administrator. So I just wanted to provide a little supplemental information on that.
This is Lainey. I have a question. So if we're just replacing Wayne essentially, then the budget hit for the new department, Christina, that you were talking about is just for hiring the assistant. Is that what that is?
Long term, ultimately, it's close. The other factor in some of these things is whenever there's a retirement of a long tenured employee, and I'm sure we've had this conversation, so you're aware of it, but for those of you that may not be, there are costs associated with that. There are payoffs in terms of accrued leaves and other benefits. So those costs are actually budgeted in here as well. There is some contractual services, so because we can't lose Wayne right away. I mean, there's going to be a transition period, and so we have budgeted for some contractual services of his time to help with the transition. So that in this budget year, I would not call it budget neutral, no, to that one position. Going forward, it will be closer to that as we phase out those contractual services, and as of course we only have to pay those one-time closeout costs one time. And that's probably the best explanation I have. So it really is not neutral in this year, but long term it will be. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Other questions?
So this is Rebecca. I just want to ask about the vacancy savings. It seems like $200,000 is not a lot for the size of our budget. So are they're found other places throughout the budget and not just in general fund? Is that right?
I'm sorry, 200,000?
That's what it looked like.
No, the $27 million is actually only 92.5% of what we started with as a calculation for personnel services. So we already this $27.5 million. Let me put this back up. I already took it down. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Is already reduced by the 7.5% that we budgeted. And we're projecting to do just a little bit better than that, $200,000 better. So it's really, this vacancy savings was more like $1.5 to $2 million. And we're just going to do a little bit better than we budgeted. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
So for instance, and I'm just going to run my calculator here really quick. If we took just even a 5% vacancy savings on that 28.2,
1.4.
that's $1.4 million.
So that's the projected for the current year vacancy savings?
The 27.3 is the current year projection, yes.
And what is your overall projection for vacancy savings for all general fund offices and departments?
Well, we assumed it 7.5% for this year. Historically, it varies. It varies kind of widely. It's been as low as 5% and as high as 9%. We hit 9% once, and in the last 7 years. I wouldn't recommend trying to go for that.
I just meant with the additional measures that were put in place this year, because I'm looking at the sheriff's offices and for all of our funds, and we're looking at 1.2 million just for our sheriff's office for all of our divisions.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Sheriff, if I might I think you're remember that the budget number that's actually highlighted there, the 27,570,000, is a 7.5% vacancy rate. If we came in at 27,570,000, we've met our target of 7.5% vacancy. What's projected is actually better than that. So it's more like 7.7, 7.8 or 8. So the number to the right of that, the 27 million, is that's a better number than the 7.5% vacancy rate that was already in the budget.
Right, I was just trying to determine what that overall amount was for all the general fund departments.
It looks like it's going to be somewhere between 7.5% and 8% this year if we go where you guys have projected it. So.
Okay.
So then what if we, can you give me that number again? That you have projected there 28,290 without any vacancy savings. So then you did what and got another number?
5% would give us $1.4 million.
1.4 million less of the 28,290, right?
Right.
Uh-huh.
Reduce it to what, 26.8? No.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I guess I'll ask the question. I think that having a budgeted vacancy rate makes sense. I think we've demonstrated or are demonstrating in the current fiscal year that the budgeted vacancies are real. And if we make a 5% adjustment to the 28.9, that's about 1.4 million that reduces our overall expenses and really continues the practice that we had in place that worked in the current fiscal year. So I think there is value in making that adjustment. I would support it.
If it's the general consensus of the group, I can certainly put that in for our next round, our next look. It's a simple adjustment to make.
And again, that adjustment is to the budgeted vacancy rate.
Yes, it shows up as a budget adjustment, which reduces the amount of personal services expenditure authorization that the departments will have. We are discussing whether or not we are going to do that at the department level or at the program level. Remember, the general fund is actually appropriated at 3 program levels: general government, public safety, and community services. Last year, we budgeted this vacancy savings at the department level. Functionally, some departments can handle it better than others, and some departments can generate savings better than others. And so we're discussing whether it makes more sense to budget this vacancy factor at the program level rather than at the department level, understanding that everyone's going to have to work towards generating these savings wherever possible.
This is Joe. I was curious, you said it in the past, and that's prior to the new policy on freezing for 6 months our vacancies. The vacancy rate had gotten up to 9% at one point. And so
one time in the last 7 years.
Yeah, I understand. I just can't imagine why the vacancy wouldn't increase with this new policy. And so I think 5% would be more than reasonable. So I support that.
Okay. Yeah, like I said, what we budgeted last year was 7.5%, and we are on track to meet that. So there's definitely some flexibility in what we set there. But for this next round, I can put in the 5%. I think that's a very safe assumption, and then we can discuss from there.
So I think with doing that, my main question would be, will we need to still hold the 6-month vacancies for open positions that we're currently doing?
I would say as a general rule, yes, probably, wherever possible.
Katie has her hand up. Sorry, Katie.
Yeah, thank you. I was kind of waiting for some other M team members to talk about this first before weighing in. I mean, I know those 6-month vacancies create a burden, especially with departments that either have higher turnover or that simply can't do things because of rules and regulations and that kind of stuff with staffing differences. However, I think running this again with those same savings in would be incredibly valuable, because the board has not made a decision to do away with that 6-month vacancy as of yet. I think it also might be helpful, Christina, if you could crunch some numbers around our existing six-month vacancy, but also what would a 4-month vacancy look like? What would a 2-month vacancy look like? Is there any savings, you know, in a different scenario? I think that would be helpful to look at, but I absolutely think we should have some of that to be considered.
This is Lainey again, and I mean, I don't think it's a secret how I feel about the 6-month hiring freeze policy, but like in my department, and I know in the sheriff's office, we have a lot of turnover, and that's just the nature of our office, and we always have. And we're a department that has statutory timelines that we have to meet, and we have things that we have to get done. And when we have, like, I had a DDA resign 2 days ago, just on the spot with no notice. And so it puts us in a really hard spot to not be able to hire DDAs and police officers. And so I would hope that if we go forward with something like this for the next year, we can talk about different, I mean, not just a blanket hiring freeze that's the same for each department. I would hope that we would prioritize things like public safety and departments that have statutory mandates that we have to meet.
Yes, we're really in a position where we're going to need to look at cutting services if we continue having to have this, just because of the training time that's involved in getting somebody on there. And we are not getting the applicants as we used to, because law enforcement right now is not in a good place, as we all know, around the country. So we're not going to lower our standards as far as hiring, and we are already working on a plan, if this continues, to cut services.
Cinda, I see your hand up.
Well, I would also like to add that even in the best of hiring practices, like even when personnel is really has fire under a hire, we're seeing that it takes at least a couple months to get somebody through the process, from the requisition to the interviewing, to the decisions, to the background checks, to the, like, it's a couple month process. And I can tell you all that my department went without any dispatchers. A public transit agency went without any dispatchers for like over 6 months, and I cannot operate like that. That's like me, like my department going without drivers. There's certain things you cannot do without. So that's just my 2 cents.
Well, it may go without saying, but if we don't reduce that expenditure there, we'll have to look at higher level of cuts elsewhere to balance the budget, or enhanced revenues, but that's a tougher nut. Katie.
Yeah, I got confused. So I felt, I guess I'm looking to Sheriff Landers and Lainey for a little clarification here. So at first I thought, Sheriff Landers, you were supportive of redoing this budget with that 6-month vacancy savings. I thought that's what you wanted to see. But now I feel like I'm hearing you'd rather not see that, and that, you know, kind of your position and some positions of others is actually to not have that 6-month vacancy shown, but to rather cut services. And I feel like we're not being clear with Christina on what we're asking for here on this next round.
We are just in a really bad cycle, and if we continue this, it's going to get further down to where we're going to have to cut services. I mean, right now we're 6 down in the jail. Overtime is up, and I'm hearing every day how burnout is affecting them to where they want to go somewhere else, where they don't have to work as much overtime, don't have to have those mandates. So all that's going to do is next time somebody leaves, that's another 6 months. Somebody leaves, another 6 months. If we wouldn't have had that, we already contribute to a vacancy savings every year without having the 6-month period. We can go back and look over the years how much vacancy savings the sheriff's office has done because of that. But to have that built in and with the training, it's just a cycle that's going to continue, and we're going to find ourselves further in deep water to where we're just burning people out, or we need to cut services, we need to reduce, jail population. Something has to happen to somehow stabilize us so that that we can continue on that trend, is what I'm saying. So it's just real difficult. We made it this year, but it wasn't easy, and it was also a very difficult year to do it. And I can't continue on the same trend. We need more people even without having these vacancies. So especially on the road.
And Katie, that's kind of where my department's at too. I mean, we are down 2 DDAs and down staff, and our DDAs are having to work weekends and nights and carry huge caseloads. And that's just to keep up with the crime that's in custody and being cited into court. That's not even getting to our backlog of review cases. And we have DDAs that are burning out and looking to leave and applying out. And so every time a DDA leaves, we can't fill that position. And we're going to get to the point where we just have to stop prosecuting crime. We're going to have to just say we can't prosecute B misdemeanors and C misdemeanors countywide because we just don't have the personnel. And if you look at, we have how many law enforcement agencies? 5 in our county, but we just have 6 of us prosecuting all the crime in the entire county. And so every time we lose somebody and we can't fill that position, we take a huge hit, and our DDAs are burning out. And I know we have one that is going to leave in the next couple months. We had one that just quit on the spot, and stress is really high for us. And we haven't been teleworking or anything with COVID. We've been there every day trying to push this stuff through, and it's starting to take a toll. And I think when we had our DDA resign 2 days ago, I had every single DDA in my office was asking me, are we going to have to wait 6 months to fill? We can't keep doing this. And I certainly echo their concerns. So I don't want to have to stop prosecuting certain crimes, but that's where we're headed if we have to keep doing this.
I guess, sorry, I was just going to add to it what Commissioner Hunt said. If we need to look at taking cuts and prioritizing where those cuts are coming from, if those are layoffs, at least we know how many we have to work with, and then we can adjust our cuts accordingly. It's this, are we going to be full? Are we not going to be full? So, when I try to determine, well, should we cut people? I'm like, well, no, we still have the same amount of staff. It's hard to justify cutting, except for the fact that we really don't have the staff, even though they're on the books.
That's basically what I was going to say, Sheriff, was that unfortunately, to both you and Lainey and others listening, this is not a situation where we just get to not have some type of cost savings, because we will be over budget on that. So I think what I'm hearing both of you say is, and it's only 2 of the whole in team, but that you would prefer not doing a 6-month vacancy and instead looking at, cost savings in other ways, which may include layoffs of certain people and services. And I think last year when we looked at this and when commissioners looked at that, we were trying to retain our employees. That was our goal, is to not have layoffs, to not let go of services. And I feel like maybe I'm hearing you'd like to have at least entertain a conversation of going the other direction.
Well, no, I appreciate that, and I appreciate the efforts to try to do that, because nobody wants to do layoff, and that's why over the year we, basically tried to do with what we had, but we just, I guess it failed as far as we can't continue on the same path. If we were able to open that back up again, obviously with the way the numbers look, that's not possible, but we were going to be okay. We can start hiring and get people back in, and then just go back to that normal vacancy that we always have. And then again, I guess that's where I'm kind of looking at that percentage and asking, some offices like ours, if you look historically over the years, have that vacancy. Maybe it's whatever the percentage we determine, maybe it's already built in and we are going to see that regardless, just from historical efforts, and we don't need to put a hiring. And I think that's a little bit what Lainey is saying too, is maybe look at some of those. Some departments never lose anybody. Some departments probably never saw any vacancy savings, but like I said, I'm looking at, we were estimated to do 905,000 and we're at 1.2, 354,000 above what we were required to save this year, because we got into that cycle where we couldn't hire, and then more and more people just continue leaving to where we're in a huge deficit. So I guess a little bit what I'm saying is sure, let's lower that percentage, but let's look at it by department office. If they historically meet that, then why do they need to have that 6-month hiring and just continue on?
I agree with Sheriff Landers.
Can I just add something? Yeah, that
Sure.
this is also interesting to hear and important to hear. I remember 9 years ago when I joined the county and I participated in my first M-Team budget meeting, and I was so incredibly impressed at the quality of the dialogue and how rational everybody was and honest with each other about our issues. And I yearned at that moment for saying, I wish the rest of our employees and I wish the rest of the county could see how we go about our business. And I made a comment at an M-Team meeting not long ago. I sure hope that this M-Team budget process sort of matches that sense of candid problem solving that all of us have done so well ever since M-Team was established. And so, I remember the narrative 9 years ago was, because a lot of these themes are the same, that we came out of a really bad recession. There was an awful lot of, there were layoffs, right? And then when I came on board in 2012, things were beginning to heal a little bit economically. But at that point, we were again having to always say, well, what kind of money do we have to work with? And how can we begin to build back in those departments that took a real hit during the recession in terms of layoffs? So, and again, I just want to say some of these things we've been wrestling with this for a long time. And I'm just so excited because now we have, for everybody that wants to understand how our government works and all of the hugely difficult decisions we all make, trying to stay staffed up. Lainey, I got statutory deadlines too all over the place. I've got so many land use thank God the economy's humming in Lincoln County, but all our narratives are probably pretty much, we're all burnt out. Our employees are really struggling. And while we're all saying this, at the same time, I'm looking at Christina, it's like, but somebody's got to mind the store and make all these numbers work. But I think it's great, and I'm glad for people in the public and other employees can watch how hard we're trying to make some really difficult choices here. So I hope that editorial comment it's meant to be entirely constructive. This is not easy. We all have needs. I said that to Commissioner Hall about our department, that we're really dropping balls left and right. And we're inconveniencing people because the scale of what we're being asked to do exceeds our resources. And so again, thank you for letting me say all that, because I just think it's important, not just for the new members of the M-Team, but for people externally watching this. Yeah, this is how the sausage is made. This is what it's like to have all these demands placed on us and all these good people that try so hard to get these services out, and for all of us to try to make these departments run, including trying to deliver a budget, because we can't just go start doing deficit spending. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for my.
Thank you. Mike, I see you've had your hand up. Go ahead, Mike. We can't hear you. I can't hear you. No audio. Your mic's green, but you're not, we can't hear you. One of the challenges of virtual meetings.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, one of the things that I've seen that has been across the board is that everybody is suffering. And I think we can kind of go through this and do some hand wringing or whatever, but the bottom line is this is across the board. And if your department thinks you're being singled out, I can guarantee you you're not. Everybody is taking a hit. And the problem that we have is that we're going to have, the paradigm has changed, and we need to recognize that the paradigm has changed, and that needs to recognize, we need to recognize that our normalcy, we're probably not going to go back to that normalcy. I'm sorry to deliver that message, but it's going to change. It has to. We got health and welfare costs going up 9% this year, 9.5%. Everything is going through the roof. We're being asked to do more with less. And quite frankly, that's what we have to do as managers, is figure out how we can do more with less, because we're bumping up against it, folks. I can tell you, I look at HHS and I don't know how they're keeping it running, quite frankly. They're bleeding people. When you compare our salaries of our nurses to the nurses down the street, I want to tell you, over a 17-year period, those people are going to end up making $500,000 less. It's that graphic. And so the question that we have to come up with is, all right, what are the priorities? How are we going to allocate it, and who gets what? And I understand we got statutory requirements that we have to meet. I also know that, some counties are able to do it, others are not, and they've had to bite the bullet. But that's where we're at now. And if you think that it's going to get rosy in 6 months, or we can fix it in a year, that ain't going to happen. You're just not going to be able to print enough money fast enough. It is tough times. The sooner that we recognize, and the first solution to solving a problem is recognizing that we have a problem, we're spending too much money. That's all I can tell you, is I see it across the board.
And I just want to say, I'm not, obviously I'm advocating for the sheriff's office and the things we're going through, and I know everyone is struggling with this. And I think, to touch a little bit on what Mike said, I think I also need to, when we had the recession years ago, we knew why we were in that place, but maybe Christina can help us. Why are, times are good, the economy's good, the stock market's good, there's homes being built. Help me figure out why the revenues aren't reflecting that coming in maybe a little bit to show our growth, and how that is, we were doing really well until just, I guess, last budget year.
Well, that's sort of true. I think that there were some things going on in the background that maybe masked the situation. This didn't happen overnight, but it has happened more recently than in the last decade. So your time frame matters when you're talking about comparisons. But I will say, if you look at our tax revenue, you can see our tax revenue is strong. It's reflective of the economy. We think these are good projections. They could still be conservative. It's very possible that we could do better. But the number one rule of budgeting is never overestimate your revenue. And it's a guideline that you can't do. The trick with revenue is to not massively underestimate either. And that's where the art form comes in. We think these numbers are good. I will tell you, I think our projections for revenue in both the current year and next year may be conservative. And one of the things that we're asking of this team is to go back through the worksheets that you sent me and really look hard at your numbers and see, am I missing grant revenue? Is there a grant that we've got that we haven't pulled down that we didn't reflect? Is there, look at our current receipts in terms of permits and fees and charges for services. Were we too conservative in our projections there? If we make that determination that maybe we have been too conservative, we can adjust those projections, and that will make a difference. The same is true down here in our projected expenditures. I know some departments actually put in their projection their budget. And the reality is we're probably not going to spend our budget. And here's why. All of the management and unrep employees didn't get a COLA last year, and that is included in that projection. Now, yes, it's also some of that was how we got some of that 7.5% vacancy savings. But what that means is that nobody's budgeted management number or retirement number or even tax number should be projected. We're going to come under that. And so we need to go through and scrub just a little bit harder on our revenues and projections. That's not going to solve our entire problem, but that is part of it. But going back to this intergovernmental number, you know, the trick really is I've put every single intergovernmental revenue source we've got, and other than the ones that are moving out, I mean, we can see a couple in here that it looks like we're missing, but everything's kind of lining up. Some of these things, you know, that's you can see there's a disconnect there. Our numbers going down. I think there's a reason for that. That looks like one-time money. That one, I'm not sure about. We'll have to ask about. But there's definitely areas that we need to go in and look at. But it's difficult to put. This is a complicated budget, and you can't. None of this is one thing. It's death by 100 cuts in a lot of areas. We've got increases in a lot of little increases in a lot of areas. We've got a little decreases in revenues in a lot of areas. And so it's very difficult to generalize. And I know we want to do that, but I really can't any more than I have. I certainly am going to sit down with anybody who wants to go through their numbers, and we can hash them out in detail. We can pull detail out of the general ledger and say, okay, what's going on, what's happening. But I can't give you a general, you know, what's happening. Does that? I know that's unsatisfying.
Well, if I'm, excuse me, I'm having a dickens of a time with my voice today. Maybe we, at this point, set this conversation aside as to what to do as far as budgeted vacancies. I think we've had a good discussion. Certainly, there are pros, there are cons. As I've said, and I'll continue to reference the mayor of Seattle who said it, you know, we don't have any good choices. All we can try to do is make good decisions. So my suggestion might be that, as Christina has indicated, between now and next Monday, and I know that's not a lot of time, let's go back and scrub those numbers, look for revenue opportunities, look for reduced expenses, and then we come back and we see how much we've reduced the difference between those revenues and expenditures, and maybe we see then how the budgeted vacancy conversation may change or maybe more tolerable.
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Hall, yes.
Yeah, I'm on my phone. Sorry, I can't use the raise hand function. But
I saw your microphone turn green. Go ahead.
Okay, well, thank you. I don't know. I'm just wondering, maybe it's creating more work for us that none of us need, but you know, there's a few of us I know still left. I know the sheriff is one, Council Belmont's another, but I believe this has been done twice in the history of the county budget process, where we literally sat down and ranked every single position in the county. If I recall correctly, it was 2 8-hour sessions for the entire M team, and literally went from, you know, ranked from 1 to 400 to the degree the positions were essential. And yeah, it was a long, tedious, and painful process, but I think that gave every elected and manager, a good in-depth understanding of the needs of each department in terms of how staffing applied to statutory and non-statutory functions. And my thinking in this is, unfortunately, it looks like this isn't just a one-time anomaly. This is something that we're going to be facing, it appears, for several years to come, where yes, revenues are moving up, but expenses, and in a lot of cases, fixed expenses, are creeping up at a rate where revenues are just not keeping pace. So that might be one mechanism to address, what you've referenced, Chair Hunt, in terms of no good choices, but finding the least bad choices. Thank you.
Thank you. Claire. Other thoughts or comments from M-Team?
I just like to honor that. And, the one thing, again, here I am 9 years, well, on Friday will be my 9th anniversary here. And the one thing that I've always got out of M-Team is, and Commissioner Hall, I like that idea, that exercise. Having said that, what I learned when I joined M-Team is how the amazing, important work that each one of these offices does. The more I know about everything that Dana does and across the board, Curtis, you name it, the Rebeccas, I'm astonished at how important all of these services are, and I'm astonished that we managed to provide these services with the number of people that were asked to do this. So that exercise, as important and especially for new folks, it always goes back to what Commissioner Hunt just said. It's like, there's some really tough choices here. I doubt that I'm going to listen to any one of my colleagues on M-Team talk about the needs of their office and say, I don't think they really have those needs, or that they aren't really struggling, or that their struggles are better or worse than mine. And I just want to offer that as a measure of support to each of you, my colleagues, that I get it. And I think what Mike said is important. Yeah, we're all struggling. We're all trying to make this work. So thank you for letting me say that.
You're welcome.
I guess I want to say and clarify that I'm not trying to say that anybody is more important than anybody else. And I know that everybody feels this, and everybody's stressed, and everybody is affected by this. I think what I'm saying, and I echo Sheriff Landers, is that for offices that have really high turnover and who meet those vacancy savings, do we need to have the same 6-month rule apply if we're already meeting those vacancy savings within our department, I guess is what I was trying to say. And when I say we have statutory mandates, I know everybody does, but an example of one that my department has is if somebody's arrested for a crime on a felony, we have 5 days to go to present the case to grand jury. So when I say statutory mandates, I'm talking about days that we have to get things done or people get released. And so again, I'm not saying that my department's more important than others, or anybody's department is more important than others. And I know that everybody feels this, but I think I have a duty to advocate for my department and kind of explain where we're coming from. And so I hope that wasn't misconstrued by anybody, but that's where I was coming from.
Fair enough. Other comments? Wayne.
I guess I'm a real veteran at doing this process for almost 35 years. This is, I think, my 35th time of going through the budget process. These are all issues and questions we've wrestled with since I've been here. I mean, it's just the very nature of the public budgeting process that we do, the requirements we have to meet. So I appreciate the discussions that are going on. I would just like to, on a more practical note, just say that, again, these are very preliminary numbers. And in my experience, and I will actually help all the offices and departments, because I do a deep dive into the budget about this time too. And I can find things that I see, and it's both on the projected revenues and expenditures for the current fiscal year, as well as what you're advocating for next fiscal year. There's two sides of this equation here that I think this process of really looking at those numbers very, very closely will change the bottom line number to some extent. I can't tell you how much this year it will versus other years, but that's a really important process that we need to do. And it won't stop, even though we have another meeting scheduled next Monday to continue this conversation. It won't stop there. We'll continue doing that until we get an adopted budget. So I just want everybody to be prepared to do that same deep dive in their own areas, and then we'll see where we end up with this. But the conversations we've been having are very, very similar to what we've had many years that I've been involved in the process.
Right, and echo what you just said, Wayne. I recall the last couple budget cycles, we were all asked to go scrub, you know, as soon as we did our initial, this is what we're, you know, this is our hope. We were always asked to come back and take a different look and scrub it.
Well, when I started the conversation, I said that, you know, we're, as both Anno and Wayne have said, you know, this isn't necessarily a situation that we haven't incurred before as we started the budget conversation. So there, you know, the history says going back and scrubbing the numbers has helped. I guess my question is,
to an extent, I don't know if it yielded like huge revelations, but as a budgeter, someone who's responsible for the budget, I know Christina will of course nod yes when I say the obvious, that every little bit helps.
Yep. So do we want to, I guess, leave that conversation and say between now and Monday, everybody please go and take a really hard look at your numbers, recognizing that we do have a deficit we want to shrink. And then when we come back on Monday, hopefully we'll have an improved picture, and we can continue the dialogue there and make some decisions as to how we can, I guess, ultimately balance the budget. Wayne.
Just one note that we historically what we have, and I know they were prepared for this year, the decision packets, which are requested if we do have, and I think maybe it would behoove us to wait and discuss those on Monday at this point. And I know we have some, and some of those have actually revenue attached to them, so we can have that further discussion. But it'd be nice to have that when we have maybe some more definitive numbers coming up to have that conversation.
I'm amenable if.
Wayne, did you point out though that some of those, you know, because again, this is I just full disclosure, I have one of those decision packages for the first time in 9 years, but I believe we've had a revenue discussion that accompanies it. That's a very different situation. Again, I think that's where as we scrub our budgets and we look at these numbers without necessarily having that figured out, that and Commissioner Hunt, you said at the beginning of our session that there are, you know, some potential revenue enhancement things that aren't necessarily reflected in the cold hard numbers we're looking at now.
Okay. All right. Well, certainly if the M team wants to delay the discussion on the decision packages, we can do that. I think there's certainly some value in that, recognizing that it's a little difficult to make some of those decisions when we're still wrestling with a deficit of, I'll say, significance. Other thoughts or comments? Christina, I'll put you on the spot.
I just want to say that I'm available. Deanna's available. If anybody has any questions about their numbers, how they're presented, how they look in context with everything else, let me know. If you need detail or assistance with Encode to look at history, we can help you with that as well. We have done a deep dive ourselves and have identified areas that we think can be improved. in terms of projections. If we don't get anything from you, we may go ahead and throw our own numbers in there this weekend. You know, if we think that the numbers still need to be tweaked. I would prefer that it come from you guys, though. You're the ones with the boots on the ground. You know what's going on in your departments better than we do. We can only see what Encode shows us, and that doesn't always reflect reality. I will say the latest reports that I gave you yesterday include all of accounts payable through yesterday and include payroll all the way through February. So they are the actuals that are on those worksheets are updated, and so that may give you some insight as well. Barring that, you know, I'll work over the weekend to get that whatever you get me in for a new set of reports on Monday.
If I might clarify, Christina, you're not going to go in and make budget adjustments to other departments without some notification, or
I will let you know if we adjust it, but there's a lot of things that probably should be adjusted. And so it may end up being a summary email. It's like, here's all the budget adjustments I made.
But also,
can you take a moment to explain that a little bit more, what the kind of things you would be finding and that we could expect, what that means?
For instance, I mean, the prime example is any kind of management or unrepresented personal services expenditure or projection that matches budget, we know is false. We know you're not going to spend that much because it was budgeted including a COLA and we didn't do a COLA. So that's an example of what we would change. We would change an expenditure projection that shows 0 but has actual expenditures. You know, so obvious things like that. Anything significant, anything more than about $10,000, we would definitely talk to you about. Now, if I find it on Saturday, I'll talk to you about it on Monday, maybe in this meeting. But you know, we're not going to go in and wholesale start whacking budgets. You know, we're really just trying to get to a closer reality.
Okay. Katie's got her hand up, but Rebecca, you had your mic on, so we'll go Rebecca and then Katie.
So can I just clarify what the goal is with, I know my budget's not affected so much, but I'm just curious if we're trying to erase the 5 million deficit and end up with a $6 million carryover. Is that what we're doing?
No, the $6 million carryover, if I took these reserves out, and I'll just do that for, oh, I don't have this up on my screen. Hang on. I'll show you what happens. All right, it's back up. So if I wipe out these reserves, our deficit goes away. So the deficit
we have no reserves.
we're doing, but we'd have no reserves, exactly. So basically what I did is I built an ideal deficit, or I built ideal reserves in, and that's what's driving this number. Realistically, any reduction, you know, for instance, just again as a what if, we can't take it at debt service, but if we did, it reduces our budget. So the axiom with budgeting is there's 2 ways to balance a budget. You can raise revenue or you can cut expenses. Reserves are technically, when you're balancing budgets, an expense, but it's basically money you're holding back from your resources that you have no intention of spending. So it's part of that balancing between what you have available and what you need to have left over at the end of the year.
So in other words, we're looking at about $1 million.
Oh no, we're looking at about $5 million because unless the board and the budget committee decides to go with a reserve that is less than their target, then we need to come up with about $5.5 million. But again, this number, this is kind of an order of magnitude kind of thing. This is not the number. Fund balances, as I pointed out, are still in flux. I have to post audit adjustments, and that's true for your funds too, by the way. I have audit adjustments for each of your funds. Any fund with payroll, the payroll accrual was not posted, and so that needs to go in. I'll have adjusted beginning fund balances for everyone next week.
Oh, okay.
Quick question, if I may.
Katie, excuse me, Katie, you had your hand up, and then Sheriff.
Thank you, Chair Hunt. I guess I would just say that given the things Christina had just said she was going to try to be, looking for in budgets and adjusting, I think it would be helpful if people could actually look for those things in their own budgets. I know the M team has, always kind of have the control of that budgets with oversight from finance. And so I think it would just be helpful to the overall process if everybody could take a look at their own stuff and make those changes if they can find them themselves, rather than having Christina do all those things she just said. So I think some assistance there would be probably appreciated.
I think that's the objective for sure.
Yeah.
Sheriff.
So I know something that I think we have done often in the budget is looked at that overall contingency. How much money does the county have in the bank, and how much do we need to keep adding to sustain those levels? Back in the recession, we went way down, and since then we have been climbing. So where is that number? And because that may influence what we need to hold in contingency this year, may help balance the budget along with what savings we're going to be able to find.
Is contingency the same as reserves?
Essentially, yes. Now, there are some reserves that we must have. We have to have a reserve for compensated absences. That's an audit requirement. There's no way we can do that. That's only about $1.5 million for the general fund, though. We should have a reserve for debt service. All of those things are encompassed in this $6.4 million. So that literally is, 2 months of operating expenses. So the sum of personal services plus materials and services divided by 12, multiplied by 2, that's that reserve. Yes, you can budget less than that. That's the absolute question, or the absolute answer. The BOC and the budget committee can decide to budget less than that. But it's my obligation to, in this first pass, to go with the policy that's been established.
And I think, Christine, if you go back to the beginning balance historically, it was increasing, and as we've seen some reductions, potentially significant reduction as we look at next year.
Do you remember where we were at back in the 2009 era in the recession? Does anybody have a reference to that? I'm just curious.
I don't have that off the top of my head, but I could get it.
I didn't know if Wayne or somebody could remember, or just roughly, but that's okay.
It was significantly less, but that's when we started the process. I mean, we basically used up a lot of reserves in addition to making cuts in services to balance out those budgets back in the day. And we've been trying since then to build those up to what, the recommended amounts are since that time.
Mike, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I was going to say there has been, I think, a little bit of at least kind of a whisper about a concern that one of the proposals that we had in negotiations for the group is a change in the structure and how we fund our health insurance. And the change was basically that we're proposing is that new employees start paying 80-20. The thought is, and Christina, correct me if I'm wrong, but the thought is if we can influence our cost structure for the future, it gives us a little bit of daylight to play with, because we're not going to be so committed. And it's especially important, and I know it's not a popular subject, but the fact is that nobody's got $100 deductible on their car insurance anymore. Nobody's got, those real low numbers, and we still have a great plan. And yeah, you know, I remember when we first went, when I was on the other side of the table and I first had to buy into employees paying a share of their premium. Everybody is having to do that. And the fact of the matter is that, yeah, it's going to put us ahead, but, you know, compared to some counties, but there are some counties, for example, that I've done a comparison in the transit district. All they provide insurance to is just the driver, and they get no family coverage whatsoever. So all I'm saying is that when you take a look at this stuff, there's no silver bullet in this. What we have to do is to incrementally do a lot of things right in order to get this revenue picture straightened out. That is that cost shift, I understand, will be unpopular. But yet when you look at all of the other, you know, possibilities, it does help to protect employment. It does help to protect jobs. So I just ask you to keep that in mind. We put that on there, and I think that that's going to have to be an issue that we stick pretty hard with.
Now, I'll go back, Sheriff, you were asking about reserves historically. I first served on the budget committee as a citizen representative. I believe my first year was 2006. And then, of course, when I became a commissioner, I continued to serve on the budget committee. But it seems to me, and I'll use you know, cash days or cash reserves, because that's a chart that the Board of Commissioners sees annually, that our auditor Paul, I guess with the help of Christina, prepares. And I think that the cash reserves got down around 30 days. I believe they got over 100, and I think they're now significantly reduced. I haven't seen a recent number, but I'm gonna guess if we're talking 60 days and it's a bite on the budget, we're significantly below the high point. And that's, again, a different variation on reserves, but so it would support the fact that it's been a challenge. We built it up and it's taken a hit again.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's what I was looking at, just to see if we were, that's what I wanted to see regarding of how you reference it. I want to see how significantly we were dropping. That's what I was kind of trying to get at.
Wayne, did you have something you wanted to add? You turned your camera on.
Well, just to note, and you know, the change this year to move community justice out into its own separate fund, I think one of the things you got to be careful with, Sheriff, is that the reserves historically have had both restricted and unrestricted funds. And what we've seen is a growth in the reserves, in part has been with some of those restricted funds, not the unrestricted. And that's what bottom line, what we need to be worried about in the general fund right now are the unrestricted funds. So you can't just look at those. Unfortunately, the comparisons from years past included both restricted and unrestricted. And now we're making doing a better job of really separating those out. So you got to be a little bit careful with comparing the numbers.
All right, I guess I'll ask, are we clear on what our next steps are between now and Monday? I will say that I've been a part of this, as I've said before, and I know that historically the efforts to look extra hard at those numbers has been beneficial. So that to me is encouraging. And again, you know, Christina's not going to be out there hacking budgets, but she may help, I guess, promote some dialogue as to some possible adjustments, but that would happen on Monday.
Or in the meantime, if I find anything in the meantime, I will let you know. And if you have any questions, call me. If you want to just mark up your worksheets and send them back to me, that's fine too. Or shoot me emails. Oh, I've got this one change. Format is not important at this point. Just shoot me the information and I'll make the change.
Any questions about that process? Okay. Any last remarks? Christina, Wayne?
Just to note that we'll be back here Monday morning at 9 o'clock, continuing these discussions. So everybody be prepared to come back.
All right. And I would say thank you to all. I think it's been a lively dialogue. I think it's a good conversation, and it's a part of the process. So thank you all. And if there's nothing else, I will say goodbye. Have a good next few days crunching numbers, and look forward to seeing everybody on Monday at 9 o'clock for a virtual meeting. Okay. Thank you all.